What was your journey to becoming a genetic counselor?
Hi, my name is Michaela, and my journey to becoming a genetic counselor, I'm actually going to start with undergrad. And so when I entered undergrad, I was pre-med with a psychology major. And so all throughout undergrad, I always had inklings that being a doctor wasn't necessarily for me, but that was my plan, so I kept going with it. And then one day in my junior year, I got the opportunity to shadow a doctor. And so after that day, I immediately knew that being a doctor was not for me. And so, of course, I freaked out because I had been working my whole life towards this goal. And it was becoming apparent to me that I had to pivot. And so, in my freak out as a psychology major in my junior year, I decided to declare biology as a second major. And so, I ended up getting a dual degree from undergrad in biology and psychology. And so from there, in addition to declaring that second major, I also got involved in research on campus. And so I did that up through graduation. And then after graduating, through networking and a little luck, I was able to get a position at the NIH in a lab focused on immunology. And so I knew that immunology was ultimately probably not where I was going to end up, but I also knew that the NIH was a really good place to be if you were interested in science. I really wanted something that allowed me to combine my love of science with my love of working with people in a more concrete way than I feel like maybe being a doctor would be able to. And so through talking to people, I at the NIH, I was talking to one of my coworkers one day, and she mentioned that genetic counseling was a thing that exists. And so as soon as I heard about it, I went to my desk and I Googled it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm meant to do. It combines exactly the intersection I was looking for between science and psychology, or I should say biology and psychology. And so from there, I immediately started putting in the work to become a genetic counselor. I already had a lot of the prereqs just because I think I was subconsciously working towards being a genetic counselor, even though I didn't know it existed in undergrad. But I did end up going back to community college and redoing some of my classes just because some of my grades weren't the best, like my organic chemistry grade, my chemistry grade, and then a few other classes like physics wasn't the best. And so redoing those classes allowed me to boost my GPA. I also reached out to tons of genetic counselors and started shadowing, informational interviews, all of those sorts of things. And so I applied the first year, didn't get any interviews. The second time I applied, I got 5 interviews. And then after going through that process, I matched with Stanford. And so that was back in 2021. I actually graduated almost a year ago in June of 2023. And from there, I went on to work at NCI as a cancer genetic counselor. That's the National Cancer Institute at the NIH. And so that's where I am now. And I think that pretty much sums up my journey as a genetic counselor.
How did you choose your genetic counseling specialty?
I forgot to mention this in the journey to becoming a genetic counselor, but as part of my preparation for graduate school, I actually became a genetic counseling assistant in a cancer genetics office. And so that was an excellent experience for me in preparing for graduate school and just getting a better understanding of what it means to be a genetic counselor. And so through that, I also learned a lot about cancer genetics. And so I've always been kind of interested in that. Even my research at the NIH was cancer genetics focused, or cancer focused, I should say. And so going into school, I knew I kind of had an interest in cancer. And so I did tons of different rotations and different specialties. We got a wide variety of exposures at Stanford, including variant interpretation, prenatal, medical genetics. Like some people did neuro rotations, cardio rotations. I did like a rare disease rotation. So I say that to say I got lots of exposure to lots of different specialties. And so through that, I kind of figured out that one thing I really value is walking into the room feeling like the expert in whatever I'm going to talk to my patient about. And I feel like the specialties that allow me to do that, such as cancer and prenatal, were kind of where what I was drawn to. With something like MedGen, where every week it's interesting because you get some different rare disease you've never heard of. That actually made me uncomfortable because I was walking into the room talking to somebody about something that has a significant impact on their life that I didn't know about last week. And so that kind of pushed me towards where I am now in the cancer realm. And so upon graduating, I focused mainly on cancer and prenatal jobs. And so through applying and interviewing, everything worked out for me to work here. And so I really like the fact that I'm in the cancer specialty, where for the most part, I know what to expect. I do get some interesting cases every now and then that are off the beaten path, but for the most part, I know what to expect. I have answers to the questions, and I also really like that it's research based, so that I can, get that experience as well. Just because I did have a strong research background that I would like to continue throughout my career.
What does your typical workday look like?
My typical workday looks very different from day to day. I feel like a lot of people say that. For me, that is definitely the case. Some days I'll have 3 patients. And so if that's the case, it's usually double checking my prep before the patients, trying to write as much of their note as possible after seeing them, and just um, I guess pounding the pavement, so to speak, grinding out those patients. Other days I may not have any patients, and so on those days I may focus on calling out results, or if I got a weird variant, doing research, trying to figure out if there are any resources that I can give a patient prior to calling out results. I'm also in the beginning stages of working on a research project looking at how people are referred to the National Institute of Health, NIH, specifically relating to prostate cancer, because I see a lot of prostate cancer patients. And so I've started in the beginning stages of doing literature review, um, and reaching out to different people to try to get more information to inform what this research project would look like. I'm also on the committee, research committee, for one of the students that was the year below me in graduate school. So some days I'm either corresponding with her or reading her manuscript. There's lots of trainings to do. So I say all that to say each day is very different, and there's a mix of several activities that take up my time. But one thing I'll say is that I'm almost always busy.
What is the most challenging aspect of being a genetic counselor?
The most challenging aspect of being a genetic counselor for me, I will preface my answer by saying that I graduated in June of last year, and so I'm still very new at all of this. And so, with that in mind, there are a lot of things that I'm learning and growing on currently. I would say the thing that has been most challenging for me recently is providing psychosocial support for my patients. And the reason for that is just because when you go into a genetic counseling session, you have a list of things that you really feel like you need to talk about: family history, talking about the testing, the types of results for testing, all those kinds of things. But you also have this patient who may be dealing with a lot on their own. As a person who sees cancer patients, I've been seeing a lot of patients with tough diagnoses, or either giving unexpected or difficult results that involve a lot of screening or a significant increased cancer risk. And so being able to balance um, how much time to spend on information giving versus what the social support should look like for them has been really tough lately. And so that just goes back to thinking about, do I need to just talk to them about how they're feeling? Do we just need to spend 15 minutes on that? Or is this a person who I should refer to a social worker who can get them connected with a therapist? Um, when we are talking, like, what are the specifics of what I should be saying to them to make them feel supported, especially without trying to make them feel better, which is not always something you can necessarily do. And making a person feel supported versus better are different. So I say all that to say, I do think learning to psychosocially support a patient will be something that I will continue to learn more and more about for the remainder of my career. But I would definitely say that is something that feels challenging right now. And I also think that what is most challenging will change over the course of my career. Maybe at some point I feel more comfortable with psychosocial, and then going back to the literature and learning more about specifics of a condition will feel tougher. So I think this is always a learning, growing, evolving thing. But that's what I've been learning about lately.
What do you like most about being a genetic counselor?
The thing I like most about being a genetic counselor is the same thing that drew me to the profession in the first place. I just really enjoy talking to patients and being able to, give them education on genetics. And then, even more so than that, I think there's something really powerful about being able to be a part of or be with someone in what is a really tough time. Like health challenges can be very vulnerable, and I've had patients who I call them and I give them a positive result, and I'm telling them all these cancer risks and all this increased screening they have to do, and at the end of the conversation they thank me, which is just so weird when you think about it. I'm the bearer of bad news and they're thanking me. So I think just being able to be a compassionate presence and be with someone and be able to support them through something that is really tough is just it's definitely my favorite part of being a genetic counselor. Um yeah, I don't know. It's just very moving, and I just feel so honored to be able to serve in that role for people. So I definitely say that is my favorite part about being a genetic counselor.
What advice do you have for aspiring genetic counselors?
My advice for aspiring genetic counselors, I will say I feel like there's a million things I could say, but I think I would just say I have two specific pieces of advice I want to include for the purposes of this video. The first is that persistence and tenacity are really important throughout the process of becoming a genetic counselor. It is a very, very long road from beginning to end. Once discovering genetic counseling, you have to do all the things, all the prereqs, all the experiences to make yourself qualified to even become a strong applicant. And then after applying, you have to go through grad school interviews, which is draining in itself. And then once matching with a school, you have to do school, which is its own beast. And then after graduating, you have to take boards, which is something I recently finished. Not something I necessarily even thought about until it was happening to me, but it definitely felt like another hurdle that maybe I didn't think about so much. So I would just say, even beyond boards, honing my skills and learning and growing, there's definitely a learning curve once you graduate and you're out in the real world as a genetic counselor. So not being afraid of setbacks and challenges, and just being, like I said, persistent and keeping your eye on the prize, because if you feel like genetic counseling is for you, it's all worth it. All the hard work is worth it and very satisfying at the end, where you can kind of look back and see how far you've come. So that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is put in the work to get a good understanding of what this career entails, what genetic counselors actually do, what they can do. There's a lot of new applications and specialties of this degree. So just taking the time to learn about all aspects of genetic counseling, and equally, if not more important to learning about the profession, is doing self-reflection and learning about yourself, thinking about why you really want to do this, what things about you make you uniquely qualified to be a genetic counselor, what you want to bring to the profession. Knowing all of these things will be super important for applications and interviews and being able to illustrate all of that when trying to get into school. But it'll also be important during school and afterwards. Even me, as a working genetic counselor, every once in a while, I have to go back and kind of reassess and reevaluate what things are drawing me to the profession. Why do I want to do this? Having that knowledge base, that foundation, that kind of centering point for why this is something you want to do or what you're working towards will serve you well throughout your career. So I think those would be my two pieces of advice for aspiring genetic counselors.